Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 16 of Forget Your Warranty, the review series for the aftermarket pre-tuned cars on Gran Turismo 6 in particular. And this particular vehicle is one of the slightly newer additions of tuner car to the game, one of the more popular aftermarket tuner cars as well, and a very popular base model to work from. If you think about it, there are more Honda S2000 based tuner cars than any other vehicle in the game. You've got the AEM, the Opera Performance, the Spoon, the Mugen, and various others. There are loads of variations of the S2000 featured, and the S2000 is a great car to work from. It's very popular with fans, owners absolutely love them, and although it does feature excellent technology, it's a relatively simplistic sports car. It's not really over the top in any particular way, it just does what it does, and it does it very well. And that makes people happy. Now, when you're tuning a car like that, the only way you can really go is up. It's very difficult to take a car like that and make it worse. It can be done, of course, but not by the kind of tuners that we'd see on the game. Now, this vehicle is one of the more visually flamboyant S2000 variants. It's the AEM S2000. And this particular model is very heavily visually modified. It's got a wide arch body kit, a carbon fibre bodywork, the rear wing, obviously decals all over the car, modified interior, etc. And it's not just visuals that have been improved, it's the performance as well. This is a very powerful car. 535 horsepower fully tuned is not bad at all. The fully tuned torque sits at 425 foot-pounds, which is very high in fact for a VTEC engine, and one of the reasons why the torque is higher than you'd typically expect for an S2000 is because the engine is larger. Usually the S2000 in its original form was a 2 litre, then you can get some with a 2.2, some of the newer models. This has been bought out to a 2.4. So not a massive increase, but an increase nonetheless. Now, as far as fully tuned specs, we've talked about the power, we've talked about the torque. The weight isn't as light as some other S2000s, it's certainly not as light as the Amuse S2000s for instance, but 1155 kilos is not bad at all. The horsepower per tonne due to the combination of power and weight, neither of which are amazing, but both of which are pretty good, means that you put out 463 horsepower per tonne, which, although isn't a number that you'd necessarily write home about, isn't bad. The fully tuned PP is 566, which is reasonable. You can understand why it's around that level, but at the same time you definitely wouldn't want it to be higher than that. And as far as price, I would say this car's actually very good. It is, of course, based on the Honda S2000, which is already a great car. It's very heavily modified, and it's a full premium. And it still only costs 100 grand. Now, 100 grand is a lot more than the normal premium Honda S2000, which can have, in some ways, better specs than this car. But for an aftermarket tuner car overall, I would say 100 grand is a pretty good price for this vehicle, because of course with aftermarket tuner cars you're not just paying for the increase in performance, you're paying for a new overall package. Visuals, the fun factor, the speed, etc. It's all improved, or so you'd hope at least. Now, this vehicle is not repaintable as some of the other tuner cars, or as many of the other tuning cars in fact are, and so what you get is what you get. You can, however, change the rims, so there is some room for personal variation there. And as far as performance, as I've mentioned before in this series, most tuner cars don't tend to be that great in a straight line. In fact, oftentimes they will be slower, especially for top speed, than the normal versions of their respective model. The Skylines, for instance, are slower than the normal premium Skyline, etc. That is also the case with this car. The standard S2000, the premium one that is, can do around 225 under its own power. That's without NOS or draft. This car, despite being slightly more powerful, around 15 or so horsepower more if I remember correctly, isn't quicker in a straight line. In fact, the top speed is considerably less. The acceleration is pretty good, but again, not necessarily improved over the normal version. So you're not really paying for a race car when you buy this vehicle, you're buying more of a show car. Now, be that as it may, this car does definitely have its uses. The primary one, I would say, being as a drift car. It makes a very good drift car. It can certainly go up successfully against vehicles like the Blitz Skylines, the HKS model, the Silvia in particular, and various others also successfully. It makes a very good drift car. It's well balanced. The wider track makes it more controlled, and you can throw the car through the corners more than you would, say, a normal S2000 to some degree. But as a track car, as a race car, in effect, it's not necessarily the best choice to go for if you are an S2000 fan. If you are a fan of the S2000, you will probably want this car in your collection anyway, because it's a nice version of it. It looks very accentuated, it's over the top, and it looks, I would say, cool. But for performance, it's not a superior track car. You'd hope it would be, and in some ways it can seem to be, but the reality is it's actually not. So if you're looking for a drift car, or if you're just looking for a different version of the S2000, then it's a great car, especially for the price. If, though, you're looking for something more purely for competition purposes, then you may want to give it a miss, because there are definitely better ones out there, including, but not necessarily limited to, the premium Honda version. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.